This is Deborah Tavares with StopTheCrime.net, and today is a very, very somber day for our team at Stop the Crime. But before I get into what we all face in one aspect of what we all face, I would like to, of course, invite all of you to subscribe to our video YouTube channel on StopTheCrime.net and press the bell notification. And please help us get this information out far and wide while we are still able to get this information out far and wide. Our time for communication is narrowing, and I'm going to go over that in a moment. I want to remind all of you what was told us back in 1981 by the former CIA Director, William Casey. William Casey said, and I quote him, "We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false." And it's not just the American public, it's the global public as well, and you can see that happening right now worldwide. COVID is a business. The attack on us is a business, it's commerce. We're going to talk a little bit for a moment or two about how we really became in the position that we are now, so that for those of you that have not heard some of our prior information, you'll be reminded of what we face. Because what we face is the end of humanity and global upheaval unlike ever before experienced, surpassing what our grandparents, those of you that have grandparents, could remember in the Great Recession. We face a greater change to our lives. And I want to remind you that Senate Report 93549 revealed long ago that we are the enemy of the state. We're all the enemy. And I can say to you that what we're seeing right now in the NASA War document, of course, I've talked about that for many years, and it's actually on StopTheCrime.net, and the title is Future Strategic Issues, Future Warfare, circa 2025. It says in this document that all the technologies that are discussed are fully operational now. Everything is operational. So I'm going to bounce around. I don't have any particular order in mind other than to get out as much information as I can right this minute. I will tell you that you've heard me talk about truth trauma over the years. And truth trauma really doesn't describe how our team at StopTheCrime.net is feeling these days, as we're watching much of what we have been discussing for many years come to fruition. So it is a sad day, but there is joy and happiness also, and we're going to work on showing you what you can do, given what we're going to tell you is being done to us. So what we're seeing right now is a worldwide impact of ongoing IT revolution upon the global societies. What we're seeing right now is a forced transition, whether you like it or not. And what we're seeing is telecommuting, tele-shopping, tele-entertainment, tele-travel, tele-education, telemedicine, telecommerce, telepolitics, and tele-socialization. This is on page 16 of the NASA War document. And I would implore upon each and every single one of you to take a look at this document. It reveals much of what is occurring on the larger sense, because I'm going to be focusing specifically on Rockefeller and Rothschild's plans to literally bankrupt the global economy. This is a plan. Everything that we are observing that is occurring right now is a plan, a stealth plan that has been hatched many, many, many years ago. I'm going to remind you what the Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars document has told us. And I'm going to actually read some of that to you right now, because it's imperative as I continue to go through the plan that we all face as a result of COVID and the virus and the business. So again, in the Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars document, which you can download off of StopTheCrime.net, and we've discussed this for a very long time, and in that document it reveals that in 1954, at their first meeting at the Bilderberg Hotel, the global elite agreed to a corporative government taking control of the U.S. population. They have taken control of the global population. And of course, we are USA Inc. The U.S. military described this program in detail in a technical manual dated May of 1979 called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. This plan was a result of the joint efforts of Rockefeller, Harvard, and the U.S. Air Force. Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. On page 4, it told us this: "It's patently impossible to discuss social engineering or the automation of a society, the engineering of societal automation systems, silent weapons, on a national or worldwide scale, without implying extensive objectives of social control and destruction of human life, slavery, and genocide." Now I'm going to pause for a moment, because I have many videos on StopTheCrime.net about genocide. I have multiple videos on many of the topics you're going to hear me discuss right now. So I'm going to go on a little bit more with Silent Weapons. For those of you that may not have had an opportunity to read it, I would again ask you to please read it. The Manual of Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars in and of itself is an analog, a declaration of intent. Such a writing must be secured from public scrutiny. Otherwise, it might be recognized as a technically formal declaration of domestic warfare. Furthermore, whenever any person or group of persons in position of great power and without full knowledge and consent of the public uses their knowledge and methodologies for economic conquest, it must be understood that a state of domestic warfare exists between the people in control and the group of persons and the public. We are at war. We are at war. On page 5, the original purpose of the operations research was to study the strategic and tactical problems of air and land defense with the objective of effective use of limited military resources against foreign enemies. It was about logistics. It was soon recognized by those in position of power, Rockefeller and Rothschild, that the same methodologies could be useful for totally controlling our society, and it has. With these three inventions under their direction, those in positions of power strongly suspected that it was possible for them to control the world with the push of a button. They are now controlling the world with the push of a button. Immediately, the Rockefeller Foundation got onto the ground floor by making a 4-year grant to Harvard College, funding the Harvard Economic Research Project for the study of the structure of American economy. 1 year later, in 1949, the United States Air Force joined in. It's important to understand that all branches of military are under the control of those in control, the 1% of the 1%. Make no mistake. We are engaged in a warfare of proportions that most people find difficult to wrap their heads around. I did, so I understand. And before I knew what I'm able to tell you now, I did not know. I did not. And it was with great trepidation, and it was great reluctance, and it was also with difficulty in believing that my journey has come to this place in time. And this is a very difficult place in time. So, the Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars goes on to tell us, war is therefore the balancing system by killing the true creditors. That's all of us. We, the people, that's all of us, worldwide, killing the true creditors. The public, which they have taught to exchange true value for inflated currency, and falling back on whatever is left of the resources of nature and regeneration of those resources. I'm going to read that again, because what we're going to get into right now is going to underscore the ability of our future survival. And again, our lives are going to depend on falling back on whatever is left of the resources of nature and the regeneration of those resources. Then, in 1976, Congress decided to modify the national state of emergency, but continued to classify the American people as the enemy. We are the enemy of the state. The populations worldwide are the enemy of this corporate takeover, Earth Inc. We're all the enemy. That's why we are being set upon with poisonous water, increasing frequencies that are diminishing our ability to continue to survive. The 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, the global grid, the smart meters, the wireless water meters, and the concern of 5G. We are the enemy. And the future, by those that are in control, depend on 5G being rolled out. That is a requirement for the future transition of humans into transhumanism. So we're going to talk about a little bit more about what has happened and why, and then we're going to get into a specific document. And I want to, first of all, acknowledge those that comment under our videos. We're listening to you. We're reading them. While we are unable to respond often because of the intensity of our work at this point and what we're doing to survive, we're going to be discussing that, how people can survive, what we must do to feel a level of empowerment in a time in which those that are in control have control of all the technologies, all the weather weapons, control of every aspect of the delivery systems that are causing us pain, destruction, relocation from properties, creating fires, outages, power outages, mass evacuations, smoke, mass hurricanes, tornadoes, diminishing our growing lands, and our food supply. That's our face, and much more. So everything the corporation and international bankers have been doing is one entire fraud, and sadly most people are not recognizing this. While I'm going to defer to the discussion of COVID and 5G and chemtrail relationship, which we're well aware of, to those doctors that have already outlined those, and we posted that on stopthecrime.net in our hot topics. You can find many of those articles and documented evidence of this weaponized technology of fear and how we have been taken over by fear. People are hiding in their houses, truly believing that they're going to die. And of course, we know with our diminished immune systems, intentionally so, many will. We know that the disinformation and manipulation by those in control have been to centralize control of all people, all land, all resources, all technologies and economies. And that's what we're seeing now, centralization. We must expose the hidden secrets of these corporations, universities, and institutions that have set upon us with emerging technologies that are rebuilding the world's transportation, civil, manufacturing, and physical infrastructure with cyber infrastructure, computers, networks, and sensors, the transhumanism agenda. I want to discuss what all of you are saying now, the PSYOPs, with the often daily briefings from the presidential task force that you're seeing on television. I want to break it down because I've done that in many videos that I do have posted on stopthecrime.net, but the advisory boards and the task force are PSYOPs. It's the illusion of experts weighing in and making decisions for you that are based on evidence that will best serve you. This could not be further from the truth. What we are experiencing and what is happening right now is, of course, we're the enemy. And what we must understand, absolutely must understand, and this has been pointed out now by many doctors, and I'm going to underscore this. It's important to know, many of you now do, but it's worth saying this again. The CDC is a private, for-profit corporation doing business. The CDC is not a government health advocacy organization. It is a corporation listed on Dun & Bradstreet and headquartered in the state of Georgia, with strong ties to the pharmaceutical industry. Therefore, their recommendations are influenced by the fiscal health of their corporation. Understand, when your local news media and outlets and your local health agencies tell you that they're following CDC guidelines are a business of vaccinations and vaccines. Make no mistake. Make no mistake. The state and public health institutions are also private, for-profit corporations doing business. When I hear our local health CEO advisor talk to us about social distancing here in Sonoma County, where I am, I know that she is working for the cabal. She's taking marching orders from those that are set to destroy us. And the media is compliant. We know this. So the state and public health institutions, as I said, are private, for-profit corporations doing business. Medical clinic records are frequently reviewed by state public health departments, which are also for-profit corporations listed on Dun & Bradstreet. Did you know that? Did you know that? Who receive money and compensation from the CDC to perform their functions. Therefore, state public health departments' recommendations and actions are influenced by the fiscal health of their own corporations. I hope you're understanding what I'm saying. This is a vast network that is void of ethics and morality and is set to destroy everything that is good and decent. Everything. The American Academy of Pediatrics is also a private for-profit corporation doing business. The American Academy of Pediatrics is not a health advocacy organization. It is a trade association corporation, also listed on Dun & Bradstreet, headquartered in the state of Illinois, whose monetary compensation from vaccine manufacturers contributes to the fiscal health of their corporation. Physicians get more money for each fully vaccinated child from the CDC, the World Health Organization, and all of the other funders, Bill Gates, the Clinton Foundation, and more. Physicians who are intentionally misinformed by the CDC, and I said intentionally misinformed by the CDC and Big Pharma, cannot be sued for vaccination injuries. You know that. They are paid higher insurance reimbursement rates for each fully vaccinated child. This is profits for science. Motivate vaccine mandates. So as we are all sequestered into our self-imposed prisons within our homes and hiding over a virus that does not transmit from person to person, you have time to look at some of these documents that I am referring to, and I would wish you would. Don't be duped into the virtual reality television and Netflix and HBO and all of the other phony entertainment to distract you while you are being destroyed. Your children are being destroyed. Our country, our cities are being bankrupt. Here in Sonoma County, we were already in a very precarious situation, as many counties are across the country, because we had not only in 3 years experienced massive fires every 3 years, massive smoke and lung damage. Remember, lung damage. COVID, smoke, lung damage. Think of Australia. Think of all of the locations worldwide that are being hit by directed energy weapons, causing fires, destroying homes, and smoke. Smoke is a weapon. I have much of that information on stopthecrime.net. Again, I want to underscore the task force and advisory groups were set up by the World Bank and the RAND Corporation as massive disinformation campaigns. Who runs your cities are the international bankers, the Big Pharma also, as well as the IMF and the United Nations. Your cities are operating under those guidelines, and your staffers in all your cities and all the public agencies are putting forth the agenda that we now see transpiring worldwide, where we are locked in place in our homes. We're seeing different levels of what being locked in place looks like. I'm hearing from friends all over the world on what it looks like in their country, and it's barbaric. It's inhumane. But humanity has no definition in what is planned for us. So I'm going to go over a document. Again, I want to thank those that brought this document to my attention. And I'm going to go through it because this is the Rothschild-Rockefeller plan to bankrupt the world. And I'm going to spend some time going over this, and we're going to talk about what we're seeing happening in real time, because you're going to be able to compare what this document tells you it is. Again, now, this is going to be under the show notes of this video. You'll be able to pull up this document in its entirety. I'm going over aspects of the document that are just excerpts. So you will want to possibly review this for yourselves, and I would ask that you do. And please share this far and wide. This is the Rockefeller plan to use bioweapons to impose martial law, one quarantine at a time. The name of this document is Scenarios for Future Technology and International Development. These are the plans to allow for absolute, massive achievement of scenario planning. This is script writing in advance of creating the realities that are being created for us. That's why this is important to understand this document. I've gone over many documents over the years. These are all evidence-based documents. It is in their words, and as I go through this is not to scare you. This is to empower you by knowing what their plans are, so you can decide what you're going to do to survive. Because again, I read to you just a bit ago in Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, we're going to have to rely upon what is left in nature. And that's what this plan is going to divulge. It's going to be up to every single one of you on how you choose going forward. And I can tell you that being metered, any type of metering, be it water, be it electricity, be it gas, or even propane, you're hooked up to a system that is set to be withdrawn from you. And we will go over that also. But it's important to understand about this document, the Rockefeller plan to bankrupt the world, along with Rothschild and the other purveyors of this evil. The report is the result of extensive effort and collaboration among Rockefeller Foundation's initiative staff, foundation grantees, and external experts. The Rockefeller Foundation and the GBN would like to extend special thanks to all of the individuals who contributed their thoughtfulness to this plan and their expertise to this plan throughout this script writing scenario. Others' enthusiasm and participation in interviews and workshops and the ongoing iteration of the scenario made this co-creative process more stimulating and engaging than it could ever have been otherwise. So I want all of you to understand before I break into this, because this is going to be outrageous. It is outrageous. This is exactly what you're seeing in the daily briefings with the task force that is being shown to you on television with Fauci and all of the other quote-unquote leaders of expert advice telling us how we need to shelter in place and destroy the economies and ratchet down our lives to the year 1700, because these have been the plans all along. They're following a script. This is scenario planning, and it is fully engaged now. I want to, I'm going to cut this off in a half an hour and have a second part to this as I break into the details of this document. But I want to remind you all what we have been told. And we have been told that excuse me for a moment here, because I want to get this spot on, and I intend to. We have been told that land cannot be treated as an ordinary asset or controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. Private land ownership is also a principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth, therefore contributes to social injustice. This is a report from the United Nations Habitat Conference in 1976. Now, before I get into the second part of this discussion today, I want to go over something most important. It's about the Wildlands Project. It's about the closings of all your parks, beaches, walkways, and now we're finding that people that park and watch the sunset in San Diego, California, are being issued $1,000 fines. Soon we will be issued fines for going outside our homes. This is an intentional shrinking of our ability to access land, and this was foretold in the Wildlands Project. Now, many of you may know, many of you may not, what is involved in the Wildlands Project and in the deep ecology. And I want to outline that now, because as I go over this Rockefeller document in this next segment, you can reflect on what I'm telling you right now. The goal of the Wildlands Project is to set aside more than 50% of the North American continent as wildlands. Now, we're not only just talking about America, we're talking about worldwide set-aside reserves and preserves where human access is denied. It's for the preservation, we're being told, of biological diversity. The project has sought to create reserve networks across all continents. Reserves are made up of the following. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. I'm going to hit the high parts you need to know. You're seeing this happening now wherever you live, whatever country you're in, whatever island you're living on, preserves are being set aside. So they're saying that they are creating cores which are created from public lands, such as national forests and parks. Our national forests and parks are being shut down. Even some of our bike paths we are not able to ride bikes on now. The buffers, they say, are created from private land adjoining the cores to provide additional protection. Protection. Did you hear that? Protection. Corridors are a mix of private and public lands, usually following along rivers and wildlife migration routes. The primary characteristics of core areas are that they are no less in size than 100,000 acres and desirably over 2 million acres in the continental United States, and they allow for little, if any, human access. The primary characteristics and the 8 points of deep ecology can be summarized as follows. All life, human and non-human, has equal value. So as I dig into this Rockefeller document, you'll see why we will not be allowed to eat food derived from nature. That is why the president, the CEO, the crisis actor of this United States has created an executive order bringing in biofoods and GMO foods. We're going to talk about what that will do to the global populations in the revealing of this scenario planning with Rockefeller and Rothschild. Resource consumption above what is needed to supply vital human needs is immoral. I want you to hold on to this as you are watching what is determined to be essential jobs. You're also now seeing what is not essential in some of your stores, such as buying clothes, buying shoes. Again, resource consumption above what is needed to supply vital human needs is immoral. It is being decided for you what you need for vital survivability. And if you use more than what is decided for you, you are immoral. Human population must be reduced, and civilizations must radically change present economic, technological, and ideological structures, and that's what we are seeing right now. Believers in this plan have the obligation to implement the necessary changes. The Wildlands Project itself is supported by thousands of groups working towards its long-term implementation, and implementation may take 100 years or more. They're not short-sighted in their planning. What we are all facing right now is stealth long-range planning, 100 years or more. This global shutdown and bankruptcy didn't happen in just a few months. This was part of a strategic scenario plan. The Wildlands Project has received billions of dollars in support from wealthy and private corporate foundations, and some of which is the Turner Foundation. We're talking about the Ted Turner Foundation. Many of you may have seen the interview that I recounted when I spoke with Ted Turner a few years ago. It's up on YouTube. The name is something like Ted the Malthusian, Ted the Terrible Turner. And he talked about massive depopulation, massive restrictions of resources, because he said we would be running out of water and food. I want you to hold on to one bright spot, and actually many bright spots, but one right now is that we are not running out of water. We have primary water. So go to our other website, primarywater.org. Spread this information out far and wide. I can tell you people are listening. People are getting to primary water. Many people are doing this. Are you one of them? Because you must get to water. Any way you can, support those that are in the wildlands urban interface and help them and get to the water that they need. Your survival and your participation now will require joining together and starting a network of communities to survive, and you'll hear about that. I'm going to finish this because then we're going to take a break and get back into the document in full. But the Wildlands Project, again, is supported by millions and billions of dollars by wealthy and private corporations. I mentioned the Ted Turner Foundation, Patagonia, W. Alton Jones Foundation, the Lyndhurst Foundation, and hundreds of others. The conclusion, the Wildlands Project exists within legal boundaries. In other words, they've made the illegal legal, just as our criminal courts are presumably courts for justice. It is the most highest ranking injustice setup that most people cannot even imagine. It's all corrupt. Everything is rigged. They say that because all of the planning for the Wildlands Project exists within legal boundaries, that should not prevent them from being concerned. At the very least, it advocates an extreme manifestation of environmental and public policy. Therefore, any claim the Wildlands Project makes towards public policy must be debated. I'm going to add right now, must be debated. This is what you're seeing with the task force. This is what you're seeing in the advisory groups. The visual illusion of a debate on television and at every level of the corporate agency structure worldwide. It is the illusion of your consent, because debate is your agreement, and it is not. And ultimately decided in the public arena, so giving again the illusion. Yet to date, it has existed. These plans have existed in anonymity, beyond the knowledge of the wider public. We're going to pause now for a moment, and then we're going to resume into part 2. So I would again ask you to share this portion far and wide, and help us get this information out, because the next part is going to be what you're going to need to know moving forward. This is a follow-up to part 1. Now we're in part 2. Again, this is Deborah Tavares with StopTheCrime.net. Please subscribe to our video YouTube channel. Most importantly, send this out far and wide. This is in regards to the planned pandemic and the scenario pre-planning of what the pandemic would provide for those that plan and are in control of all technologies weather, economics, worldwide. And part one is necessary for you to hear prior to this, because it sets up what you're going to hear me discuss in this Rockefeller Foundation plan entitled Scenarios for Future of Technology and International Development. And I told you in part one that this report is as a result of extensive efforts from many aspects of the Rockefeller Foundation. It took a year for them to assemble this particular assault upon humanity. I discussed with you the silent weapons for quiet wars and the Rockefeller and the intentions of those that are in control to seduce the global population. So again, the Rockefeller Foundation is literally a network of experts and funding mechanisms worldwide. And they've had many workshops and many people weigh in on the document that you're about to hear. I want to tell you that the Rockefeller Foundation is located at 420 Fifth Avenue in New York. And their telephone number, in case you wish to call them, is area code 212-869-8500. You might as well have direct opportunity to contact those that wish your demise. Also, the Global Business Network is at 101 Market Street, Suite 1000 in San Francisco, in California. And their direct contact number is area code 415-932-5400. We're going to get into this. These are excerpts. This is over a 50-page document, and I have taken out excerpts. We will have this under this video, so you can click on this document and to take a look at it for yourselves. We're going to go over the plan that we are all witnessing right now, because this is Rockefeller's plan to use bioweapons to impose martial law, one quarantine at a time. And they go on to say that a commercially unstable and shock-prone world in which governments weaken, criminals thrive, and dangerous innovations emerge. And this is what we're facing. This is all a plan. This is all a script that is being played out now. So they go on to tell us that also an economically depressed world in which individuals and communities develop localized, makeshift solutions to a growing set of problems. They say one important component of their strategy and their toolkit in the scenario planning is a process of creating narratives about the future based on factors likely to affect particular sets of challenges and opportunities. We at the Rockefeller Foundation believe that scenario planning has great potential for the use in philanthropy to identify unique interventions and rehearse important decisions. Rehearse important decisions. You need to understand that their illusion of philanthropic assistance is deadly. Their philanthropy monies goes to furthering their agendas. And that's what, sadly, the illusion of philanthropic contributions has been. We've been psychologically programmed with words that are not in our best interest. We think of philanthropies as a good thing, and that the corporations are giving back a little bit of what they've stolen. No, they're furthering their agendas. Important to remember. They say a scenario planning allows the Rockefeller Foundation to achieve impact more effectively. So they use the scenario planning, and they have hired many people, some of which have had 40 years plus career planning in scenario planning. Now you might think about Fauci for a minute, who's part of the daily briefing task force for the president. He's been in his position for 40 years. He is a scenario planning. He's involved in this, as are all of those engaged in the task force that you see on television right now, while we are all in lockdown, while all our stores, venues are closed, and while we are in free fall economically. This is a plan to bankrupt the global economy and transition us into a life where we are not going to be permitted to use more than what is necessary for vital human existence. And anything beyond vital human existence is considered immoral. Goes on to talk about technology and how technologies and tools will become the basic necessity for our future survival. They go on to say that the Rockefeller Foundation and GBN, which I gave you the addresses and phone numbers for, begun the scenario process by surfacing a host of driving forces that would affect the future of technology and international development. These forces were generated through both secondary research and in-depth interviews with Foundation staff, Foundation grantees, and internal experts worldwide. This report was put together in 2010. So for those of you that have watched Event 201, this is before Event 201. Event 201, again, is scenario planning in real time, describing what will be done on a global level to all of us. So they go on to talk about the uncertainties of a longer list of potential uncertainties, including social, technological, economic, environmental, and political trends. This is a bottom-up, top-down, lower levels of adaptive capacity emerge in the absence of characteristics and leave populations particularly vulnerable to the disruptive effects of unanticipated shocks. Again, the Rockefeller plan to use bioweapons to impose martial law, one quarantine at a time, is discussed on page 18, and scenario pre-planning. a world of tighter top-down government with authoritarian leadership worldwide. So, again, keeping in mind that this was put together as scenario planning and pre-planning in 2010, this is what they tell us will start occurring. In 2012, the pandemic that the world had been anticipating for years finally hit. Unlike the 2009 H1N1, the new influenza strain, they say originating from wild geese, was extremely virulent and deadly. Even the most pandemic-prepared nations were quickly overwhelmed when the virus streaked around the world, infecting nearly 2% of the global population and killing 8 million in just 7 months, the majority of them healthy young adults. I would like to retract the healthy young adults. We're talking about COVID right now, and that is a cover-up for intense saturation of frequencies and the fact that many people have immune-compromised systems, and they will not survive this increased amped-up frequency that we have military weapon systems disguised as civilian communication networks. This is what has occurred. So I go back into their scenario planning. They tell us that the pandemic also had a deadly effect on economies. International mobility of both people and goods screeched to a halt. Sound familiar? This is exactly what is happening right now. Our mobility is screeched to a halt. This is UN Agenda 21 ramped up. And I must add at this point that your country, your town, your state, your city, wherever you are, most importantly, have predominantly already implemented the climate emergency resolutions to expedite all the requirements to reduce our standard of living by eliminating what they call fossil fuels. And I will only say that our fuels never came from dead dinosaurs. We talk about that often in other videos. Eliminating fossil fuels in its entirety, moving us into dense population zones to prevent traveling. This is all happening now, and we will be relocated off rural lands, as we are experiencing here. After fire events, our insurance is no longer being renewed. So if you're in the country, or wherever you might be, and your insurance, which is all part of a Rockefeller-Rothschild cabal, will not be renewed. So I'm going to talk to some of these things from a personal note and observation of what we see happening while I continue to move through this document. And again, they talk about that everything will screech to a halt, which we see debilitating industries like tourism and breaking global supply chains. Important to note and remember, breaking global supply chains. Important to remember. Those of you that are looking to survive in tight-knit groups and form networks to survive as long as possible, supply chains are being broken. Even locally, normally bustling shops and office buildings are now sitting empty, devoid of both employees and customers. Are you seeing all of that now? Yes, you are. All of it. They go on to say that the pandemic blanketed the planet through disproportionate numbers, and many died. And the virus spread like wildfire in the absence of official containment protocols. They go on to tell us in 2010 that even the developed countries' containment was a challenge. The United States, they say initial policy or strongly discouraging the citizens from flying proved deadly in latency, accelerating the spread of the virus, not just within the U.S. borders, but across borders. And few countries fared far better. They talked about China and how the Chinese government was quick to impose enforcement of mandatory quarantines for all citizens, as well as its instant sealing off of all borders, and how that saved millions of lives, stopping the spread of the virus far earlier than any other country and enabling a swifter post-pandemic recovery. I will tell you the post-pandemic recovery is not going to look anything as our lives looked like a month ago. Will not look like anything. What you remember a month ago when they started to close down our area on St. Patrick's Day, February 17th of 2020, our lives will not return. Remember, I was telling you in part 1 that the plan is telecommuting of everything. Teleshopping, teleentertainment, teletravel, teleeducation, telemedicine, telecommerce, telepolitics, and telesocialization. Everything from afar. They go on to tell us in this, during the pandemic, national leaders around the world flexed their authority and imposed airtight rules and regulations, from mandatory wearing of face masks. Are you listening to this? Back in 2010, they are scenario planning and wrote the script. So again, during the pandemic, national leaders around the world flexed their authority and imposed airtight rules and restrictions, from one mandatory wearing of face masks to body temperature checks at entries to communal spaces like markets, train stations, and everywhere else you wanted to go. Even after the pandemic faded, this more authoritarian control and oversight of citizens and their activities stuck and even more intensified. In order to protect themselves from the spread of increasing global problems and from pandemics and international terrorism to environmental crises and rising poverty, leaders around the world took a former grip on all power, on all of you. We are going to see this massively. As I said in part 1, right now, they're issuing fines on people that sit and look at the sunset in San Diego and Southern California right now. $1,000 fines. You can't look at the sunset. At first, they tell us that the notion of more controlled world gained wide acceptance and approval, and citizens were willing to give up more of their sovereignty and their privacy. All of you are giving up more of your privacy by hiding in your homes from a business model of COVID that does not pass from person to person, as we are being told. We're hearing about hospitals in many instances are empty. They're bleeding out hundreds of thousands of dollars per day. They're empty. The hospitals that we are seeing are likely, and you can look into it for yourself, crisis actors. Because we have crisis actors of head of government. They're crisis actors. They're following scenario planning from those top 1% of the 1%. Make no mistake. They go on to tell us that in exchange for greater safety and stability, we will hover and accept less rights. Citizens were more tolerant and even eager for top-down direction and oversight, and national leaders had more latitude to impose order in ways they saw fit. In developed countries, this heightened oversight took many forms. And I want you to listen to this. Biometric IDs for all citizens. Are you hearing that now? Yes, you are. For example, in tighter regulation of key industries whose stability was deemed vital to national interests. More totalitarian authority and leadership worked less well in some cases, tragically, they're telling us, in countries run by irresponsible elites who use their increased power to pursue their own interest at the expense of their citizens. Wouldn't you say that is the United States Incorporated? Absolutely. Wouldn't you say those were the global governments around the world and how they're enacting authoritative and authoritarian regulations and rules and restrictions? Absolutely. They go on to say, across the developing world, the story was different and much more variable. Top-down authority took different forms in different countries, hinging largely on the capacity, caliber, and intentions of their leaders. There were other downsides, as the rise of virulent nationalism created new hazards. Again, I encourage you at this time to read Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars to tie into what you're hearing being said. So in this 2010 Rockefeller Foundation scenario script for our future, they're telling us this. By the year 2025, people seemed to be growing weary of so much top-down control and letting leaders and authorities make choices for them. I hope we don't wait till the year 2025 to stop this. We have to act as soon as possible to unplug from a corrupt system. They say whenever national interests clashed with individual interest, there was conflict. We've been seeing conflict prior to the COVID scare all over the world. People backlashing in Hong Kong, Venezuela, in France, all over the world, Ecuador. We have been protesting a government that doesn't exist for us. We're going to have to connect as people within our communities if we're going to survive, as this document will inform you is necessary. So they go on to say that there will be civil unrest, and in 2026, protesters will be brought down and they will be fed up of entrenched cronyism and corruption. Even those who liked the greater stability and predictability of this world began to grow uncomfortable and constrained by so many tight rules and by the strictness of national boundaries. So I hope you just heard what you just heard, the strictness of boundaries. We're going to need permits to travel, and in most instances, that's unsustainable. The governments had worked hard to establish all of these top-down control methods. And this is interesting because this is a quote in this document. It says, is it possible to discipline and control some societies from time to time? It might be, but not the whole world all of the time. The whole world right now is being controlled. They go on to say that there will be many quarantines, they will restrict in-person contact, and cellular networks will be overloaded. Are you hearing over the news now that your at-home cellular and wireless use is slowing down broadband? Yes, you are. We're being prepared to beg for 5G as we are being cooked in our homes. I have a document, many documents about the killing of us with frequencies. Certainly you can listen and watch 5G Apocalypse, listen to our video YouTube called Cooking of Humanity, and there are many documents all over the internet that will support all of our hard work over so many years, including not allowing smart meters on our homes in California. We were one of the few states in the country and actually worldwide that was able to achieve an opt-out because of our early pushback against the deployment of the smart meters. I won't go into that. I do in many shows. They go on to say that there will be Nigeria in 2026, there will be a government collapse by 2028. They go on to say that many governments will place severe restrictions on program areas in geographies that international philanthropic people can work in. In other words, they became aware that those in control and their philanthropic work was detrimental to their local economies. And so many of the leaders saw this, and they were leading to a narrower and stronger geographic focus on grant making in their home countries only. You're hearing about grant makings. Those are bribes through the corporate structure. People feel that that's free money. It's not. It's indebting every single one of us. We're going to soon be looking at massive, massive home foreclosures worldwide. And for many of you, sadly, that have taken on loans such as the PACE loans that we have talked about, PACE loans, when you work out an arrangement with your local tax assessor, that does not take into account the PACE loans that already may be part of your indebtedness in your property. They go on to talk about scanners using advanced functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI technology, will become the norm at all airports and other public areas to detect abnormal behavior that will indicate an antisocial intent. They go on to say, in the aftermath of the pandemic scares, of which there will be many, smarter packaging for food will emerge. The big corporations will repackage food, and it will gradually be adopted for individual products and consumers at a lower level. Food costs are going to escalate, and that is why you're going to hear later on about the advancement of GMO through the food scarcity that is being deliberately created right now. In fact, I'm looking at the Sunday paper here. On the front page of the agricultural industry, there's no place to sell food. Beet, B-E-E-T fields are being plowed under. Eggs are smashed due to the virus. They're reducing our food supply. That's the intention. What we're seeing in our markets right now is that retailers are more tightly organizing the produce areas and canned areas, because when they place their orders, they're not getting the orders that they've requested. And so it's an appearance that things are not disappearing from the shelves, when in fact they are. Supply chains are being cut, and we are not going to be able to access food. They go on that there will be new diagnostics that will be developed to detect communicable diseases. The application of health screening will also change. Screening will become a prerequisite for release from hospitals or getting jobs. They go on to say that there will be a telepresence and teletechnologies that will respond to the demand for less expensive and lower bandwidth, sophisticated communication systems for populations whose travel has become restricted. Driven by protectionism and national security concerns, nations create their own independent, regionally defined IT networks. They go on to say that governments have varying degrees of success in policing internet traffic, but that these efforts will fracture the World Wide Web. Get ready to have your communication cut. That was being experimented here in Northern California during our fires of 2019. Cell towers were intentionally burned. We lost at least 70 of them in the initial fire of 2017, and we were without cellular communication. So people that were fleeing their homes with the flames lapping at their heels were unable to access any alerts on their cell phones. So be prepared with alternative communication devices. Think about what I'm saying to you right now. Alternative communication devices. Why do you think the cabal of our fire departments, such as CAL FIRE here in California, and the fire agencies worldwide, have been removing repeaters for ham radio operators? Why do you suppose that? So that social distancing becomes massive distancing and unable to communicate. So we will not know what's happening to you 50 miles away, because we will have restricted travel. We saw that when we were in Ecuador. There were military checkpoints, and they had to look at our passes. In Cuba, you could not travel from one town to another without approval. The same thing is happening and has been happening in the Philippines and other countries worldwide. So I'm going to pause right now with leaving you the thought of communication, and I'm going to resume with part 3. Again, this is Deborah Tavares with StopTheCrime.net. We're going to be going over a diabolical document that you need to know about. The intention of telling you about this is so that you can prepare, not to cause you fear. This is a prepare opportunity and psychological adjustment into a world that is being created for you without your knowledge or consent, by the creation of advisory meetings and task force operations and the illusion that there is public participation.